time to do our final work for the day. So we've got about 20 minutes to try and at least begin starting to think about capturing some of the highlights of this workshop, which first of all, I think was absolutely outstanding. I know that Joseph and I and the committee were hoping that we'd have this kind of a dialogue between industry and researchers, and I think we've really done that. And so that's great. And so we've got both NASA and we've got NOAA program management in the room. So this is a good opportunity for the audience on both the research and the industry side to talk about what they think is important. I'm going to start out kind of just capturing what I think that I see of coming out of this in terms of technical directions that we should be going. First of all, I think that we have started a very successful dialogue. It's a pretty big gap between research and industry. I've been, even as planning this conference, I was amazed at how far industry is in terms of developing, mitigation strategies and things. I think there's a lot that we can leverage from that on the research side. So I've got two kind of main things to start things out, and then Joe's gonna kind of talk about the vision, and then we'll ask the audience for input. So first of all, from a satellite perspective, it sounds to me, from what I've gleaned from the last day and a half, is that industry is in some cases using VIIRS and MODIS fire detection in their planning. They're probably using like Landsat information in some of their land characterization. There was only one group that I found that was using GOES data, the geostationary data. And that was, I believe, PG&E or San Diego Gas and Electric, and that was because of direct interactions with Chris Schmidt, who's the lead on that algorithm. So to me, that first of all is an area that I think we need to make sure that the industry knows what's available from our geostationary satellites. Liz's talk at the end is a great example of how the research community is putting those data sets together, and they could very well be folded into the kind of management and planning activities already going. We have a next generation system that will be better and will be more easily used by the users. So that's something to follow up on. The other thing that I think came out of this conference, and it was really emphasized towards the end, which is fuel moisture as a key variable that the entire community doesn't have enough information about, and it's critical. And then another part of that is how the electric power generation industry is already doing very extensive monitoring of their, transmission lines, probably not as much the distribution lines, but clearly the transmission lines. And this is kind of and that data from all the MET information that's on those towers, to the drone sampling that's being done, to the boots on the ground maintenance work that's being done in terms of clearing brush and things like that. This is a classic, multi-scale problem. And for certainly the folks at NASA, we talk about integrated observing systems, and this is a perfect example of that. So how do we take what's already being done by the industry in monitoring their transmission corridor? We've seen we need to know more about what's the near field in that corridor, so that when wildfires are going to impact your transmission lines. And conversely, if there is fires at the transmission line, how are they going to propagate into the broader community? So that's an area where I think there's a lot of room for growth. So we heard about the airborne program that's being flown right now. There's certainly strong possibilities for those kind of things to grow and mature. And I think that would be kind of a key focal point that we could start thinking about. How do we take what's being observed on the transmission line in terms of your management and broaden that out, fill the gap between what the satellite see with airborne sampling. You know, NASA supports both orbital and suborbital, which really means aircraft measurements. So those are the two kind of big takeaway messages that I saw in terms of directions for future research. And I will let Joseph take over now.
Howdy. So great summary. I won't be long because I want to make sure we have room for discussion. But I do want to point to a fact that we kept having be repeated, which is giving all of our partners proper credit for what we do and what we don't do with them. And so, for example, our Native American partners who came here today, a lot of us are doing work in tribal communities. However, we didn't highlight it, right? It was a second thought or it was an afterthought. So when you're working with underserved communities or underrepresented communities, we all have to be mindful of, if you're working with them, show that up front. Don't wait till someone challenges you on that to acknowledge it, right? This is something that our federal government tends to do. Well, not to harp on any particular type of organization, but a lot of people would do it this way. And we have, as the researchers and the scientists, or just the industry folks in the room, have to be cognizant of this at all times to give credit, to whoever's working with us, and to also reach out across the aisle. And whether people are receptive to you reaching out, to continue to do so and allow them to know that it's a safe space for us to work together. And that's a big takeaway, I would say, as well as Brad was mentioning, integrated observation systems. So how do we integrate what we have? Everybody's doing their own thing. We all see it. We're all doing the same thing 1,000 different ways. And this is something we always see in science. It's like, oh, my group does this. Well, we're doing the exact same thing, just slightly tweaked. So let's stop doing that and fighting against each other, and let's bring it together. And then also, so a kind of a call to action is what I'm calling it at this point, which is, what are the next steps? What do folks want to see? And we're trying to capture that. And there's a couple different ways that I've heard from many of you that I've spoke to that you would like to have it captured. And first thing that comes to mind is a white paper. So maybe a very short, sweet, put together thing that's a result of what this conference is. Where we put that at and who it goes to, we can decide on that at some point. But just knowing these are the things that everybody from tribal, from industry, from academia to just general researchers, NASA, NOAA, whoever care about. Here's the statement. Let's hit the boots from the ground on that part. And so one of the things that also came up is manuscripts. I'm obviously I'm on the academic side, so that's what I care about. But I also heard that from my tribal partners as well, which is it brings credibility to what they're doing, right? So now they're not just saying, hey, listen to us, there's bad stuff. They can point to such and such at all in this reputable journal, right? And so giving credibility to a lot of the things we're talking about, as well as sharing that information, which is what we're here to do as scientists. And so also at some point we have to talk about frequency and continued meetings. And me and Brad have had some short discussion about this. We're thinking quarterly, whether that's us all Zoom heads or we're actually in person, we can debate. But I think being in person, you can't beat it. It's Zoom. Yeah, it's gonna be Zoom. But so our funding partners in the room, DOE, NASA, no, we're looking at you, fund us. But anyways, we should have some type of frequency meeting, because a lot of these meetings, we do all this great talk, we write all the notes, and then it goes off. So we don't want that to happen. We want this partnership to continue to grow, and this should be seen as the small and the epicenter of the start, and it should expand from there. And then lastly, again, we want to make sure everyone's needs is captured. So if you want to share slides in particular on what your needs are, or just share some statements to us, please kick that to us as the organizers, and we'll try to organize that as good as we can as we try to work through how we're going to come up with capturing those things. So just keep pestering us with points that you say, this is really important, or this is something I heard from the conference, make sure it's captured. Let us know that, and that's how we can bridge this forward. So with that, I think
So I do think Michael will be reaching out to all the conference participants, because we've got everyone's emails. And that will be a good opportunity to say points that you felt were good, bad, indifferent about the conference, and also to let us know whether you would like to be included on future emails where we have, again, it's most likely to be Zoom calls, but where we start moving forward on where do we put together a white paper on what was gained here, and then where do we target that white paper in terms of next objectives. In terms of publications, I think low-hanging fruit would be something like Bulletin of the American Meteorological Society conference proceedings. And so we'd sort of start on both of those. Those are citable works. So that's kind of the direction we'd like to go. We don't want to lose, as Joseph said, we don't want to lose the momentum that we've gathered here over the last 2 days. So with that, I would like to have anyone else in the audience in terms of what they think was captured or maybe should be further refined on top of the things that Joseph and I have said already.
One group that I think was referenced a bit, but I think we may want to include in further discussions is kind of the solution providers in the utility space. So we heard a lot of our utility partners saying, well, I use this company to, create this dashboard or to fit some of this, let's say, last mile development or tailoring. And that's a really important part of this enterprise. And so finding out a little bit more about those groups and who might be interested, I think would be valuable. And then the second thing, I love the idea of kind of some of these outputs that you mentioned, but those are often very science facing. And so how can we also do some engagement and kind of, let's say, advertising in kind of the utility space, in the land manager space, in the tribal space to let those folks know about some of this conversation. I think those would be great too.
Yeah, so again, I'm kind of for those that know me, I focus on technical details, but I think that's actually, we should probably add that, as another action item that we need to proceed on, which is not just a white paper that we use to argue for future funding, not a BAMS paper that only atmospheric scientists read, but also just, making sure that we advertise the success of this and again, use it to reach out to the communities we engaged and identify new ones. So yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Just along those lines, I want to say that Tri-State actually recently held a wildfire summit, right? So maybe Curtis can speak more to that, but I think it would be great if, researchers can attend those types of meetings because there are plenty of industry folks. And so, yeah, I mean, obviously we're holding this in a scientific setting and we invited industry folks, but it's also important that we attend industry, meetings and summits as well.
That's great. Yeah. So along the idea of outreach, so there's another good outreach so that we flip this and we go in the same direction. Yeah.
I got a couple come to mind. One is to take advantage of Dwayne Hiley's recommendation to talk to the ESCC and Secretary Granholm. Like if you get that kind of an audience, you should seize it, take advantage of it. The other one is I think maybe there's an opportunity for a subgroup of this organization or this community to present in front of the International Wildfire Risk Modeling Consortium or Mitigation Consortium, IWRMC. Bonneville Power is a member. There's a bunch of California utilities and Australian utilities that are members of that, and they'd be very keen to hear some of this information.
I'd have a quick question. Do you have a plug-in to us get connected with them? Is it okay? Cool. Yeah.
So, and again, that initial engagement might just be a presentation of some of the outcomes of this workshop, right?
Thank you. It's been very enlightening for myself, being an operations person, hearing the discussion of the work that's going on. So it's been great. Another avenue of engaging industry would be through NERC or a real-time operating subcommittee, which I'm the vice chair of, which are all the reliability coordinators in the Western or the United States and Canada we participate in. So it would be great to have some kind of presentation from this group or some nation of the white paper that when it's developed of where we want to go, because you'll get more feedback from people like me,
right,
in other regions of the country, which I think is very important, and Canada as well.
So could you explain to Brandon's not here, but there's two kind of industry level agencies, NERC and the one that WEC, thank you.
WEC.
Again, this is, part of this is
Yeah.
acknowledging that I don't understand the landscape.
So there's a layering of
Right.
regulators in the electric industry. At the very top is FERC.
Okay.
Okay. Below them is NERC, and they're really in charge of National Electric Reliability Coordination.
Okay,
Within NERC, there's subregions. WEC is one of those.
okay,
For the Western, one that's in the upper Midwest is called Midwest Reliability Organization. They're a cousin to WEC. And there's 6 of those across the country. And they're really focused on regulation, and they work with the utilities, ISOs, and the balancing areas or TOPs, traditional integrated utilities, on their operating practices, making sure they're compliant, event analysis, all, just the whole bread basket of things. Yeah.
okay. And then again, to clarify, Dwayne Hiley is the director of that,
Dwayne, who spoke here
earlier.
He's actually a member of a group. I presented in front of this group. It's a group of CEOs of utilities in the West that they meet and they talk about high level subjects.
Okay.
Wildfires is one of those.
Okay.
Markets is another. Lot of topics they talk about, but wildfires is
Okay.
one of those
Okay.
they're interested in.
I knew that, but I was trying to figure out
Where
where
he was at on
where he sat. up-
'Cause-
Yeah,
Yeah, I have a question. Oh, before you.
Steve, thanks for continuing to, yeah, what did you want to say, Steve?
So I was just going to kind of carry on with Tim's conversation. As he noted, FERC delegated NERC to be the ERO, and underneath the ERO are 6 regional reliability organizations, which WEC is one of them. WEC currently right now is heavily involved in what we call our reliability risk priorities. And one of those priorities is obviously extreme natural events, which includes a lot of things like wildfires. So we would definitely support any sort of presentation at our technical committee meetings, particularly the reliability risk committee that's focusing on these risks. But Dwayne, again, he's part of that executive group, as co-chair of their wildfire group. But we would love to have any sort of presentation at our committee meetings. One of the things that I'm working with is a strike team, and the focus is on extreme natural events. I was really intrigued by the tribal presentation and the low burning effects of fuel mitigation and low level burning. I'm trying to figure out how I can incorporate that into my work and maybe further outreach to that. I found that extremely valuable in what I'm doing with the areas I'm working on.
So I
Okay,
was
thanks, Steve.
Yeah, if I can jump in, I was going to say one question I have for, I guess, any industry folk here is, as an academic, we communicate a certain way. So what is the best way to communicate with industry folks that they'll actually pay attention? Because if we write all these fancy, journal articles and white papers, I don't know if you folks will really read that, or if you need to, or y'all read it in a different journal article format or something. Like, what is the way? Is it just go to conferences and communicate? How best to do that so we don't waste your time?
Steve can join in. I think one of the best ways to do it is through the NERC subcommittees, like the real-time operating subcommittee. You're going to get a broad spectrum of people, usually senior level managers typically, or mid-level managers that are going to have impact and have sway as to, promoting, if there's potential funding, use of this product, helping you further your direction of your research or development would be, as specific to our needs, would be probably invaluable. So you'll get a large, so I'll make a note of this for the RTOS next year,
Yeah,
and maybe try to find you a spot on our agenda. We meet 4 times a year
okay.
in person and hybrid. So
And would a quarterly, if we think about starting a quarterly meeting here for participants, would that be enough lead time to be prepared for your schedule?
yeah, I think so.
Okay,
And what
good.
we could do is we could even rotate you into a standing agenda item. Maybe sometimes you're there, maybe sometimes you're not, but you
Great.
could report on your progress or direction or want input or feedback from us.
That's great. That's really good. So I think we are,
And there's just one other thing.
Okay, sorry.
Steve is leading the strike team
Yeah.
he talked about, and I'm a member of that. That would also be a good way to get into the western utilities directly.
Awesome.
Strike.
Yeah, I was going to
Strike.
chime in too as well. We've got a similar structure that Tim mentioned about at NERC at the same level at WEC as Brandon alluded to, our technical committee structure. I'm excited about this white paper that Joe suggested creating from this conference, and we've got a wide distribution that I think that should be shared within WEC. So looking forward to seeing that.
Perfect. That's exactly the kind of thing we wanted to capture here. One more question, and then I don't want to keep people past the time because we've all worked very hard the last 2 days.
I just want to highlight one other avenue to distribute all this great work and collaboration. It's the Electric Power Research Institute.
Absolutely.
EPRI.
Yep. That's a
We've
good,
talked about that at times. I think that creates a really broad network that we can plug into with papers and discussions and announcements of events like this.
Perfect.
The similar.
that's a good one. And I know, Paul, we were trying to engage EPRI early on. I've got some EPRI contacts, but I think we need to work harder on that. We'll do one more question.
So Tim just briefly mentioned it, funding, right? So a lot of, I think, what we want to accomplish requires so much collaboration, right? Between tribal communities, researchers, industry, et cetera. So I think one thing to think about is how we can best, approach either policymakers or think about current opportunities where we can have these larger projects, larger proposals that have bigger scope and can accomplish, grander objectives rather than having these smaller individual somewhat projects, right? So I think that's just one key thing, and we should definitely think about how to go about that. I
completely agree. But I think we're at the point, so we've had the dialogue. Now we reach out to our partner organizations, continue that dialogue, and funding is something that we're certainly looking for down the road, but we need to continue the dialogue. And actually EPRI is, I've received funding for EPRI. EPRI is the kind of place where that they do engage the research community to address issues of the energy industry. So that's the right place. But okay, I'm going to close this workshop. It has been absolutely remarkable. But before I do so, I want to thank Michael Camp, who has not only corralled lots of cats, but also dogs and monkeys and gorillas and various other people. And I also want to acknowledge Steve Ashbaker, because he kind of got added to the planning committee midstream and has made amazing contributions to particularly linking the research community and identifying all the industry people that we need to get to the table, which I think we did a remarkably job of. So again, thank you very much. Appreciate everyone's. And with that, we'll close. And also sorry, I would also like to thank NCAR for hosting this workshop. It was, sorry, Louisa. That's right. No, that's right. And I do very much appreciate that. So yeah.